Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 55 of the Dynasty Junkies podcast, a proud member of the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network. I am your host, Rocky Petrella, at Dynasty FF Addict on Twitter, and with me today is a very special guest. It's a very special episode overall. We got these fancy new graphics for the live stream here, if you're watching, from Maddie at Dynasty Rewind. At Maddie Big Chest on Twitter. We're streaming on a Friday, and we have James Roday Rodriguez. You know him from Psych, from A Million Little Things, and probably most importantly is one of the celebrity participants in Scott Fishbowl 11. But James, my man, how you doing on this fine Friday afternoon, or I guess morning for you?
I'm doing just fine. It's a basic satisfactory, which is all I need to get through the day. And thank you for the fancy graphics. I know when we first started talking, I said, dude, I won't do this unless you drop some fancy graphics.
Yeah, I had to get it done.
Yeah, you did. And you did. And
I came through.
You built it and I came. So congratulations.
If you build it, he will come. Okay, so this is obviously going to be a little bit of a different show today. I feel it's kind of a little silly to have a guy like James on and only talk fantasy football. We will definitely be talking some fantasy football as the show goes on here. But I did want to talk to James a little bit about himself, about his work, and things like that. So the first thing I did want to ask you about is a lot of people are, especially if you're a casual, maybe you watch Psych back in the day, or even maybe if you're a Million Little Things fan, they know you might have known you as James Roday. And within the last year, you did change back to your given name of Rodriguez, James Roday Rodriguez. So I've seen you talk about it in print a little bit, but I just wanted to have you just, talk a little bit about that on here and why you made that decision.
Well, first of all, Rocky, there's no such thing as a casual Psych fan.
That is true. I put out a Twitter thread, announcing you'd be on the show, and pretty much 99% of the questions were from the quote unquote psychos. So
they are the psychos, and they wear that badge proudly. As for the name change, it's been a hell of a year and change for everybody. I think everyone's had a different experience. I myself personally was forced into some, solitary confinement where I was able to kind of turn my brain down for the first time in a long time, and do some self-reflection and think about my life while, meanwhile the world was in turmoil. We were facing an international pandemic. Social injustice was sort of swarming all around us. And it was kind of a perfect storm of like, hey, check in with yourself. And like I said, everybody's experience is different. Everybody's on their own journey. For me personally, I was able to reconnect with my dad in a way that I hadn't done since I was a kid, and heard a lot of stuff about my family, the Mexican side of my family, their experience coming to this country, experiences that my grandparents had when they were children, experiences my father had, and it just sort of hit me. For lack of a better word, it was time. It was time to represent, to do a better job of representing. I made that choice to change my name when I was a kid. I was 21 years old and I was still in college, and it was kind of a shotgun decision that I never gave a ton of thought to afterwards, because everything worked out. Like, yay for me. I started working pretty quickly, and the next thing I knew, I had a career, and I had a career as James Roday. So on the one hand, it was a meaningful decision for me to go back and reclaim my birth name. It was great for my father. It was great for that side of my family, to feel seen and to feel represented. On the other hand, it's an incredibly convenient decision to make once you've already, become a success. So, the regret is that I didn't do it sooner, but better late than never. And, Psych 2, the second Psych movie, was actually the first time Rodriguez appeared on screen as a credit, and it just tickled my dad to death. And that alone, just that moment was worth.
Yeah, it must have been pretty special.
Yeah.
I think it's a great story, a great decision for you. Like you said, I mean, maybe it makes it a little easier after you've been successful, but we've seen plenty of people who, in the Hollywood industry that feel they have to change their name because of it and never change it, change it back. So I love that story. I wanted you to tell it on the podcast here. And I would assume that, did that influence the sort of storyline on A Million Little Things this year, where Gary, the Javier, his real name is Javier, and
Yeah, a little bit. DJ Nash, who created A Million Little Things, loves to sort of engage our personal lives and personal experiences that we've had as much as we will let him. He does the same thing with the writers on staff because he feels like, if there's an inherent personal connection to the material, then, we'll invest more in it. And while that's not the exact story of me,
right.
There were shades of it, and he wanted to sort of to play with that. I thought it was a good idea. Had a good time doing it. I was able to be involved and sort of help kind of guide the direction of that story. So it worked. I was more invested.
Yeah, definitely. And also, I know you're a big animal welfare advocate as well from following you on Twitter and other things. You have two separate animal charities in your Twitter bio, roaddogsanrescue.org and saveelephant.org. So I just wanted to give you a chance, especially, one of the main reasons I asked you about this is we're both in Scott Fishbowl. It's kind of charity season at least in the fantasy community with SFB. So I wanted to give you a chance a little bit to talk about that.
Yeah, thanks, man. The two charities are really simple. They're both deeply personal to me. About, 10 to maybe 13 years ago, I rescued a French Mastiff with my then partner, Maggie Lawson. He is the giant head that you see behind me on the wall. He became the mascot for my theater company. His name was Franck, and we rescued him from Road Dogs and Rescues. Here in Los Angeles, it's a fantastic organization run by a woman named Nikki, who since then has also taken it upon herself to specialize in rescuing special needs smash face pups. When Franck passed away, we started a fund through Road Dogs and Rescues called the Franck Fund, which kind of just goes to everything that she does, keeping the operation running. If anything specific, it's so that if there is a larger breed that they come across in need, hopefully some of that money can help them do that as well. But that's the Road Dog and Rescue. The Elephant Nature Park, it's in Thailand, and I spent some time there. I went there right before the pandemic. Actually, I was barely able to get back into the country, and I spent a week at Elephant Nature Park, watching this incredible woman named Lek. There's a documentary called Love and Bananas. If you want sort of some context and a backstory on what this woman is doing all across Southeast Asia, I would check it out. It's aspirational. It's not super depressing, which is why I think it's effective. But anyway, she's basically just going all over Thailand and Southeast Asia, converting logging camps and riding camps into elephant sanctuaries. And showing these owners that, hey, you can still make money just by letting people come in and spend time and watch the elephants in their natural habitat and watching them have peace finally. It's just as lucrative. And sure enough, one camp at a time, she's flipping it. And this is sort of like her home base. And I went there and volunteered for a week, saw exactly what the camp needs to operate. So I know exactly what the money's going towards. And, it's a beautiful thing. I cannot imagine a world without elephants. Elephant Nature Park is specifically Indian elephants, but African elephants are going through the same thing. There's a great organization called the David Sheldrick Wildlife Fund that takes care of African elephants, but ultimately, next to humans, they're probably the most empathetic, species of mammal there is, if not more so than us. And they are endangered. They remain endangered. So. They're just they have a huge spot in my heart, and anytime I can do anything to help the elephants, I do. So those are the charities on my social media. Thanks for giving me a moment to talk about them. And I would just back your play and say what Scott's doing is absolutely extraordinary. And in my limited correspondence with him, he's really got a great take on this, because in addition
Mhm.
to having like a specific directive and sort of galvanizing the fantasy community to do something bigger than just play a game, he's also just encouraging us to be, better, you know,
Right.
like all of us, like, be touched by something, be moved by something, and care. Fantasy cares. So yeah, there's like a pool and there's stuff you can donate to, and he does the yearly drive for toys for kids. But beyond that, it's just like whatever it is that moves you, whatever it is that you're passionate about, it's like kind of a reminder through fantasy football, to give something back. I think it's awesome. I'm so delighted and honored to be participating and be a part of it. And hats off to Scott for doing such a great thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and that's why I wanted to give you the chance. Everybody has a charity, story involved in the Fishbowl. I think I've contributed to the Autism and Asperger's Network. I have a son with Asperger's, very high functioning, very great kid, but so that one's special to me. This one's special to you. I love hearing these stories. And I was asked. I didn't put it as an actual question on the sheet, but I got a couple questions in the Twitter thread to ask how your dog was doing. Your current dog was doing. I was told his name is Claude, but I'm not sure if that's correct or not.
Yeah, Claude was a pandemic rescue. Easily one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. Along with my current partner, we saw him on Instagram, I think, and went and visited him through a different rescue organization called Dog Cafe. And it had been about 18 months since I'd said goodbye to Frank, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to go back in. And then, I met this dog, and it became very clear that, of course, I should go back in, because what a unique opportunity to be able to rescue a pet during a time when you can assimilate with them and spend 24/7 for like an indeterminate period. Like, of course, that's why all the rescues, were out of dogs, because everybody realized, during this period that, like, oh wow, yeah, of course, this is the best time ever to adopt a pet. And he's awesome. In many ways, he is Frank's polar opposite, which I think made it easier with the transition, because he was such his own dude and has such a unique personality unto himself, that even though they look like they could be cousins, that they are both Dog de Bordeaux, which most people know best as the breed from Hooch, Turner and Hooch. Um, he's just a delight. He's a joy. He is an extrovert. He loves people. He's a big old goofball, and yeah, he has lifted my spirits immeasurably during the last year or so.
That's great, and yeah, I know, especially what you're saying about when you lost Frank. I haven't had a pet actually, or not a dog anyway, since I was a kid. But yeah, I know, especially hardcore dog people, losing that pet is a killer. It's like losing a member of your family. So it's great that you did found Claude to help fill that place in your heart, I guess. But I guess now we will move on to we're going to move on a little bit. Just talk about some of your your work in the TV work in Hollywood and all that. So I got this question, kind of a couple different forms of it, but I took this one from Heather Badger on Twitter at Heather Badger. Writing, directing, or acting. You're great at all three, but I'd like to know which you prefer the most. And are you writing or directing again anytime soon? And in case people don't know, James has done multiple, I know television shows. I don't know if you've done anything in film, but directing as well. So as well as Psych. And have you directed an episode of A Million Little Things?
I have not, and I think I will probably leave that others. But thank you, Heather. Thank you for the kind words. I love all of those mediums, and when I was studying theater in college, I kind of knew back then that I wanted to sort of do as much of it as I could. I was equally passionate about directing and writing as I was about acting. So it's been a wonderful ride. I've had such great opportunities to sort of grow my skill set in all of those areas. And because I've been doing so much acting, over the last 3 or 4 years, I can tell you with complete honesty that I miss being behind the camera. I need to create something soon. I am spinning a few plates right now. I'm excited about some stuff, and hopefully one of them will stick. And the next thing I do after A Million Little Things will be behind the camera instead of in front of it. That's certainly the hope.
Yeah, I imagine that kind of stretches a whole different creative muscle for you.
100%, and I can sleep later, and I don't have to get makeup, and I don't have to do any photo shoots, Rocky.
That is true. The directors don't usually get the photo shoots. So we'll get a little bit into Psych, because definitely a lot of people had questions about Psych. The one question I wanted to ask you that I had put on here is Psych it started, I believe, in 2006, and we're here 15 years later. We're going into a third movie coming up soon, which I believe you also had a hand in writing that, correct?
Yeah. We just finished it, actually.
Yeah. And so basically, why do you think Psych has had, we talked about the Psychos, the self-given name for the fans of Psych. Why do you think it has such the rabid following and staying power it has? I mean, I know I'm a fan. I love the pop culture references. I love the chemistry between you and Dule Hill. But what do you think is the reason for it?
Yeah, it's a great question. We've been asked it many times, and the truth of the matter is, it's such a rare experience to do something that sustains itself for this long. It's kind of like catching lightning in a bottle. That's why it doesn't happen very often. It had to be the right group of people at the right time, on the right network, with the right studio. Giving us a platform to kind of find our legs in an industry where you almost never get to do that. If you're not a hit coming out of the box, you're toast. And we were on a fledgling basic cable network that didn't even really know what it was. They had a show called Monk, which was kind of like their anchor, and beyond that, they were still trying to find their way as a network. So we had a lot of real estate to sort of figure out what Psych was, what we wanted it to be, what we didn't want it to be, and kind of grow together as a group of artists who all really, really, truly loved one another and got along.
I just want to say, I think it's a really good point what you're saying there, because I've actually, knowing this was coming up, it recently got me in the mood to start a Psych rewatch, and I've watched the first season, and it's definitely a different show than what it be. I mean, it's still good, but it became even more, than what it was, I think, in that first season.
Yeah, we gained confidence. We started having fun on some episodes. We're like, wow, this is more fun than other episodes. Why is that? Let's investigate that. Let's figure it out. And it ultimately just became like a giant candy store for Steve, Frank's, and I's love for all things 80s and ultimately early 90s. And when we realized that there was an appetite for that, we got even more excited. And it really did just become sort of a celebration of pop culture, of best friendship, of blue sky, and of kind of living your dream. And all of those themes are somewhat universal. And I think that's why it managed to cast as wide of a net as it did, because even if you don't get all the references, you certainly understand what it's like to run around and play dress up with your best friend and have BFF by your side for all of your adventures. And even if it's not that part that that resonates with you, it's the fact that the show's not dark. It always sort of leans into the best case scenario, the best version of people, what's hopeful. It's okay to laugh. It's always okay to laugh. And it's gotten us through a lot. It's gotten our fans through a lot. It's probably exactly what we need right now, which is why we went back and made a third movie. So I think there's a lot of elements to answer your question, but the bottom line is that you have to have the right people first of all, which we did, and then you have to be given time to sort of to watch the seeds grow and to shepherd it into something that feels right, and then you really know what you're doing, and you're cooking with gas, and then you still have real estate after that. So it's definitely the coolest gig that I ever had. It changed my life. It changed all of our lives, which is why, as long as there's an appetite for it, I think we'll always come back to do more. Also, like, how great is it to still be playing a character that I created almost 16 years ago. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's definitely, like I said, it's definitely crazy to see it last this long. You don't see a lot of shows that end up with 3 movies and maybe counting afterwards after they end. So, to your point about the 80s and 90s, I mean that's, like I said, a big part of what I loved about it. That's right in my we're almost the same age, so I just love that, especially with the casting and stuff you did, and that actually ties into one of the Twitter questions we had from Donald Berglund at Average Don. Was there an homage episode a la like 100 Clues or the Dual Spires episode? Which if people don't know, were episodes centered around like Clue and Twin Peaks that you wanted to do but couldn't.
The only time that our studio, who was always very supportive, even though most of the time they didn't really understand what we were doing, they just liked it, so that was all they needed to know. The only time they really sort of pushed back and asked us not to do something, I think primarily because they knew it was going to be really expensive, but also because they were like, I think this might be jumping the shark, which is a crazy thing to say about Psych. We were going to do a Sean and Gus go to space episode and really have fun with that subgenre, because there's so much to mine there, not just from the 80s, with stuff like Space Camp and Explorers, but, we were going to go all the way back to Kubrick and The Right Stuff, and we were just going to send it all up and have a blast. But
I'd be interested to see how you could have done that, like even semi believably.
We would, of course, spun it so that Sean and Gus believed they were in space, but weren't actually. And we would have figured out a way to bring it all home. But it would have been expensive, and you can't do a space episode without doing some anti-gravity stuff. And we were a basic cable show, so it wasn't really in the cards. But it was certainly on the board for many years, and we were ready for it because those jokes just write themselves.
And JL in the chat asks, how much are you, and I believe is also in your division in SFB, how much are you involved in the writing process, or how much is improvised versus strictly following the script?
John Luke, one of my league mates. Psych was really a celebration of everybody bringing what they brought to the table. So for me, that meant a ton of improvisation, which Dule, I think at first was terrified by, and then realized, because he was coming from the West Wing, where it was like you had to say every word.
Yeah, Sorkin.
But once he realized that was just sort of me and my process, I think he loosened up and ended up, really embracing it. We had so much fun. So a lot of fun writing and a lot of fun improvisation, and whatever was funniest always won, which was what was so great about Steve, our creator. He just wanted the episodes to be good, and he wanted people to laugh. So if it was a written joke, great. If it was something we come up with in the moment, even better.
That's awesome. And you'd mentioned Dule. Another question from the chat. A big fan of Psych from Vicky Lynn. What was your first impression of Dule when you guys started?
I thought he was a pretty smooth customer. He was coming off of a critically and commercially celebrated show that got a ton of love and had won a ton of awards, and was kind of frankly coming down to play with us because he was really interested in doing comedy, and I had a lot of respect for that. I also had a lot of respect for the fact that he wanted to sort of improve and grow as a comedic actor, because he wanted to challenge himself, and he kind of classed up the joint, quite frankly, because Charlie from the West Wing coming on set was pretty cool for everybody.
Yeah,
my closest friends were like brothers. I gave an inappropriate speech, but necessary speech at his wedding, and he's family to me, and I'm very, very lucky for that.
And I think that comes across on screen and has for a while now. So I guess one more question or one more Psych topic to bring up is Psych 3 is coming up. Psych 3, this is Gus. And I had a question from Jell at Lorelei Gilmore on Twitter. I want to know how it was seeing your Psych family after a year or so, and what can we expect from Psych 3? So whatever you can tell us.
These reunions are always beautiful because we all are so close and we remain fixtures in one another's lives. But because of life happens, and then a pandemic happens, and you suddenly don't get to see these faces that you're so accustomed to seeing. So anytime we can all get together in the same place at the same time, it's going to be a blast, and we're going to have the best time ever. Additionally, our brother Tim Amundsen, who a few years back, before the first Psych movie, suffered a major stroke, has continued to rehabilitate and get better and better. So anytime we all get to be with him and see how much improvement he's made, it's a real blessing. And once again, he's kicking ass, and he's so much further along in this movie than he was in the last movie. He's doing some really beautiful work in Psych 3. Which we're all so proud of, and we're all so happy, to be there for. The movie, the title kind of gives you, a hint that maybe it's going to be a Gus centric story. But when we last left our heroes, Gus discovered that he was going to be a father, and so you can, if you know the show, you can imagine the rabbit holes that Gus goes down. With pending fatherhood staring him in the face. But outside of that, it's all the silliness that you would expect and hope for. And there are some surprises and Easter eggs buried in there, as always. We had a blast, and we hope the fans do too.
Yeah, definitely. And before we go on to get to the fantasy football stuff, and yes, people who are regular listeners, there will be fantasy football in this podcast, but I did want to talk about some of this stuff with James, and I know some of the.
I want to talk guys.
I know. Hopefully, maybe I'll timestamp it for the regular listener. This is the part where you can go to the fantasy football, but I definitely wanted to talk about a million things a little bit too. And what was it like transitioning to a more drama-centric show? And how does playing Gary Mendez differ from playing Sean Spencer? I feel like they have some similarities, but maybe Gary's a little more mature than Sean is. What can you tell me about those two questions?
I think part one, why did I do it? It was something really different. It was something that I don't get asked to do much ever, because I did so much comedy for so long that that's generally what the business wants you to do. Is
pigeonhole you.
Is what they know. You've had some success at. So this was a rare opportunity to kind of step outside of my comfort zone and do something on a relatively large platform that I might not get the opportunity to do again, frankly. So I took it, and I'm glad that I did. It's been a whole new set of challenges. I think Gary is often used for comic relief on the show because God knows we need some. But ultimately, I think he's a cynic, and Sean was Peter Pan.
That's true.
That's about as far apart on the spectrum as you can get. So digging into a character who generally sees a glass half empty was a new thing, and also playing a man with breast cancer, which is a cancer story through a lens that we don't get to see nearly as often, but is still every bit as real and is happening to a percentage of men everywhere. Felt interesting to me, and again, an opportunity to do something that I was probably never going to get to do again. So it was one of those sort of come to Jesus moments as an artist, where you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, hey, if I pass on this, I'm probably not really an actor anymore. And that's okay. Maybe I'm ready to make that transition. I'm ready to Peter Berget, but I wasn't quite ready to do that. And so, you say yes to a role like this, because if you don't, then what are you doing?
Yeah, and I'm glad you did, and it's you've done great work on the show, and to be honest, being a fan of Psych, I think that was one of the big things that drew me into it. But I love the show overall. The whole cast is great. The storylines are great. So if people aren't checking out A Million Little Things, definitely go check it out. They do have a season 4 coming up, which I'll be asking about in a minute. But I have a couple other specific Twitter questions regarding A Million Little Things from Jenna at JVento SLP. How was your experience of living and working in Canada during the pandemic? Because I guess that's what you guys had to do, right? You had the entire time you were shooting, you had to stay there. You couldn't leave because of COVID and quarantine issues.
100%. Agent Evento, she's an OG psycho.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was wild. It was unprecedented. I mean, first of all, we didn't know if we would be able to work during the pandemic. Then, everyone got together and decided that we were going to give it a shot, for better or worse. I think it was a little easier for us initially because the show shot in Canada. Canada was doing way better than we were at that point with COVID. So things felt a little safer up there. And once they were able to put together the protocols and everyone agreed on how we were going to go about doing it, it was really just a matter of getting used to not being able to see people's faces. That was the weirdest part of it, because we were all masked up, and the only ones who took their masks off were us actors.
Yep.
And we only did that when the cameras were rolling. So even more so than being sort of isolated in a country and not being able to leave because the borders were closed, like, I know Vancouver, Psych shot there too. So
right.
It's pretty much second nature to me to be there for long stretches of time. It was really more, getting used to and ultimately normalizing working with just tons of sets of eyes. It was very bizarre. And then invariably over the course of the season, you would like accidentally catch a moment of someone having a sandwich or drinking some water, and it would be like you realize it's the first time you'd ever seen their face. Like, you've been working with them for months now, and you've heard about their family, you've heard them talk about their kids, and you've never seen them
below the eyes. Yeah.
So you create faces for people, right? Because that's what we do, and you're convinced that, like, based on eyes and forehead, they must look like this. It's never what you think, ever. Which becomes kind of like a weird game. But you know what? We got through it. Testament to our crew and to the protocols they had in place in Vancouver, because a lot of shows, struggled, were shut down for stretches of time. We never were. I think, 2 days was the longest that we ever had to stop shooting. And it wasn't even because of an outbreak or positive cases. It was because, like, we weren't getting our results in time because they were so backlogged at the labs that we're using for testing. So we were definitely one of the lucky ones. And we managed to make a season of television during the pandemic. It's crazy, dude. But we did it.
Yeah, good job on that. And I got 2 more questions here. I'll just ask them both, and you can take them one after the other on a million little things. From Emily, I don't even know how to say this Twitter handle, at DILECTVS. So I'm just going to spell it. What was James' favorite moment in season 3 of A Million Little Things? And friend of the show, Keith Ensminger at the Sming Dynasty. My wife wants to know if Gary and Maggie will ever get back together.
Well, I'll take the second question first and say I have no idea. It's DJ really likes for us to not know what's coming, and so it's very rare that any of us will ever know, what's more than an episode or two, ahead of where we are. So I have no idea what's up with Gary and Maggie, but I will say that my favorite moment of season 3 was probably Danny coming out as a young member of the LGBTQ community to his schoolmates and his classmates.
Yeah, that
storyline is probably my favorite of the Gary's storylines. I mean, obviously Gary and Maggie is central and was a huge part of the show for the first 2 seasons, but outside of that, the role that Gary has played in Danny's development and that storyline of him, becoming empowered and living his truth is probably my favorite storyline that we have on the show. I think our staff and our writers, some of whom are in the LGBT community, have done a wonderful job kind of nurturing that story and showing us, like, kind of the best version of what it can be if you're surrounded by love and support. It's beautiful. I love the story. I love the way that it's sort of we've navigated the jazz of it, and to have it sort of culminate in him, um, at 13, coming out and saying, "This is who I am." I loved it. It was a great moment, I think, for our show.
Yeah, I think that's a great choice, and I made me while you were saying that made me think too about how it also kind of informed Gary's storyline even a little more with the when his dad was talking to Danny about that whole situation and coming out and things like that. So I've really enjoyed that storyline as well. So I think that finishes up everything. All the Twitter questions I got on the TV work.
Right.
We are going to move to fantasy, but first we have a little transition here that James has graciously allowed me to do, which is a little lightning round of some fun, silly questions I prepared for James. We have 6 questions here. He has not been made aware of them ahead of time. So hopefully we can have a little fun with this. I'm curious to hear some of your answers. I will tell you that the first one has a correct answer.
Okay.
The rest of them are just open-ended questions for you to answer however you like.
Fair enough.
Okay. So I just there's also going to be a visual component to this. So I got to remove this so that I can share my screen.
Okay.
And here we go. Ah, crap. Hold on. We were talking before the show. Technology is neither of our strong suits. Bear with me a second here. Okay. Sharing the screen. James.
Yes.
Tomato or tomato?
I'm going to be honest. I've heard it both ways.
That is the correct answer. Very good. Better TV dad, Corbin Burnson or Paul Rodriguez?
Oh my goodness. So very, very, very different. I had such a lovely time working with Paul. It's actually the second time we've worked together. He played a role in the first movie I directed. Love him. Thought he did a fantastic job as Javi Sr. But I think Papa Bear Corbin might kill me if I didn't say Corbin, since we've been doing it for 15 years. So.
I was just gonna say I figured the easy answer would be to say Corbin because it's been a lot longer. So
hideous wigs and all, I gotta go with.
I know, especially season 1. There's some of those wigs, man.
Yeah, I gotta go with the Corbster.
Okay, next question. Who would be the better fantasy football player, Sean Spencer or Gary Mendez?
Gary's a sports fan. He also has a more analytical brain. He's a numbers guy. Sean wouldn't be able to sit still long enough to look at a waiver wire. So this one's pretty. It's going to be Gary.
Okay, that's a pretty good choice, I think. Favorite fake name for Gus? Do you have one off the top of your head? I know I'm putting you on the spot a little here. I'm trying to talk a little to give you time to think about it.
He says Lavender Gooms or Silly Pants Jackson. Who do I like? I think I'll back up Dule here and say, you know what? I'm going to say Jet Blackness was one of my favorites.
That is a good one.
Because I also thought it was it could also have doubled as Gus's porn name. So I felt like on a couple different levels.
Yeah, that makes it a great choice, I think. Okay, here's an interesting one. You can only choose one. Titans Super Bowl win. James is a Titans fan, for those who don't know. SFB 11 win or Emmy win for James Roday Rodriguez.
All right, I'm gonna one up you, and I'm actually gonna rank these for you.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna bring a little extra to the table. With all due respect to my industry and what I do for a living, I certainly don't do it for awards, nor do I really understand why we give awards to art ever. So I'm gonna put the Emmy win last. I tasted. I had a bite of the cake last year with the Scott Fishbowl. I believe regular season I finished like top 10. So I was standing at the precipice of an SFB 11 win, and I'm not gonna lie, it did feel pretty good. However, nothing, and I mean nothing, would top a Titans Super Bowl win. I have been a long-suffering Houston Oiler, Tennessee Titan fan my whole life, enough so to recognize that if it happens, we'll probably only get one in my lifetime. So when that happens, it will be the Golden Goose. I can't imagine anything topping it. So it's an easy gold medalist with some distance, and then a Scott Fishbowl win, and then an Emmy win. So you did it right. You already have them in the right order.
There you go. And I think you made the right choice. I always say, especially if my team is good, I'm always going for my team over my fantasy team. And I had a feeling you'd say that about the Emmy win. I know a lot of people feel that way in the industry. You know, why are we awarding things and stuff like that? And as a long-suffering Eagles fan who got that Super Bowl win a few years ago, I can tell you it was one of the most amazing nights of my life. So I agree with you. I would love to win Scott Fishbowl, but if I were you, I'd want that Titans Super Bowl win as well.
Right now, it's still a dream.
But they are still very good. So maybe this year, who knows?
We have a window.
And this next one also has a football component.
Okay.
Better hair beard combo: Timothy Amundsen or Ryan Fitzpatrick?
Timothy Amundsen, and it's not particularly.
You need to, if you're listening on the podcast, you need to check out the YouTube link here, because yes, everyone knows what Ryan Fitzpatrick's beard and hair look like, but Timothy's looking quite dapper here, and it's pretty amazing, I must tell you.
Yeah, it's about as good as it gets with the locks and the beard. He's got several different beards he can grow. He truly is a gentleman in the truest sense of the word. And Ryan just kind of looks like, he's going for it. It's just whatever happens. And props to him for he somehow manages to fit it all into the helmet. And, that's something. So good for him.
Okay. So, like I said, sorry, let me get rid of that. So for the people who did tune in for fantasy football, we are now at that portion of the podcast. And the first thing I wanted to ask you is, how long have you been playing fantasy football, and how did you get started playing fantasy football?
I think it started in high school, where two of my buddies and I would use values in USA Today and kind of created our own league, like a 3-man league, because USA Today had some version of fantasy football with like a player and number values, and we gave ourselves a salary cap, and then each week we would make moves. It was just the three of us. And we would usually do it during, economics or some class where none of us were really paying attention. Cut to 1999, I think. The internet is born. I'm finishing up college. ESPN has a website. I see that you can play fantasy football online. I get 9 of my buddies together, and we start a league that is still in place today on ESPN's platform. So I would say 99 was the first time I played fantasy football properly. That then became fantasy basketball and fantasy baseball.
Wow.
With the same group of people. We still have that same friendly league, which is now expanded. We've lost some, we've added some, but there's like a core 7 or 8 of us that have been in that league since 1999.
Wow. And that is pretty similar to me. I started in the late 90s. I actually did do the paper and pen thing back in the mid 90s, and then picked it back up, kind of like what you said. And is it just those 3 leagues you're in? Do you well, I know we talked, you have a Dynasty league. You become a degenerate and have like 10 leagues, or are you just those 3 different sports in the Dynasty league?
I certainly went through the phase where I was a degenerate and was doing way more leagues than I could handle. I finally managed to kind of find some balance, simply because I can't be a deadbeat owner. Like, I just can't. If I'm going to be in a league, I want to be able to give it some attention. I want to be able to compete. I think it's the right thing to do for any league. So, I've got my friendly league, which I'll always have. I play in the Scott Fishbowl because I just think it's a wonderful thing that Scott's doing. I did join my first Dynasty league last year, so I am a Dynasty newbie, as I've told you. And then I still do mess with some high stakes NFFC action because I got introduced to them about a decade ago, and I had some immediate beginner's luck success, which
That'll hook you.
made me feel like I was obviously one of the best fantasy players in the world. And then I quickly learned that, that is not the case. Those ladies and dudes are like professional poker players, and it's almost impossible to compete at that level anymore. But I like Greg and Tom, so I will still throw my hat into the ring with one of their best ball leagues. They have a league called the Cut Line, which requires less time, which is great for me. And I've had some continued success there. And then inspired by Scott Fish, last year in the NFFC primetime event, WWE superstar The Miz and I co-managed a team, but we were playing for Connor's Cure, which is part of the V Foundation's cancer research organization. And we tried to encourage everybody in the high stakes community to do what Scott has been doing with the Fishbowl. And we'll see, we'll see if we can break down some of those walls. We're doing it again this year with 5 teams instead of 1 team. That'll kind of be peppered throughout the primetime event. Each owner of those teams will be playing for Connor's Cure again, and we'll see if we can't generate a little excitement and some philanthropy, and owe it all to Scott for showing us that we can be more than just fantasy football geeks.
That's great. And I guess I was going to ask, as you were talking there, it made me think, is it hard to keep up with stuff given that you work very different hours than a lot of the rest of us?
It is, but it's also like my biggest vice. It is the thing that kind of brings my brain peace. So I need it, frankly, and I've been doing it for so long that it is something that I can naturally kind of carve out time for. Because it is anytime I'm doing fantasy stuff, it's when I'm able to kind of reset my brain. It's a much better habit than cooking your own meth, which I can tell is not a great idea.
I've heard that doesn't go very well.
Breaking Bad really romanticized it. I think hey, I want to be like Walter too. It's not a great.
It's not as glamorous as it seems.
It's not as glamorous at all. So landing back at in the fantasy pond was much better, and I appreciate it even more now.
And a couple more kind of general fantasy questions. Shane in the chat says, "Do you play any IDP?" I'm totally out on IDP, individual defensive players, but I'm curious if you've done any of that.
Yeah, at some point over the years, our home league, I was commissioner for all 3: football, basketball, baseball, for probably the first 15 years, and then. Because I did get so busy and I was like, gosh, I don't want these leagues to suck. I did hand off commissioner duties to all 3. And when that happened, the dude that took over our football league implemented 2 IDP spots on our team. So we do now have 2 defensive players on our teams. They generally always get selected last by every team in our drafts. We've been trying to come up with a way to make them more impactful. It usually just comes down to everybody has 2 linebackers who get the most tackles instead of having to count on someone who can
interception,
or sack a quarterback. It's like you want the consistent, you're going to get 6 points because this dude just makes a lot of tackles. So it's usually that, and then. I think last year we tried upping interceptions to 4 points a pick and sacks to 2.5 so that we could kind of try to balance the level. But look, it's a fun thing. I only have it in 1 league. I think anytime you're trying to sort of sustain a league over many, many years, you're going to have to get loose and try some stuff and kind of keep it fresh. It's kind of like a marriage, I would imagine. Even though I'm not married, I would think that, you got to do stuff to keep it fresh, right? So. Yep. That's what IDP was for us. We added a super flex. It's this, it's the same story that you hear from everybody who's been doing fantasy for a while. Some stuff works, some stuff, but you got to give it a shot.
Yeah, makes sense. And the The other question I had was also from he also had a question from his wife earlier. Keith Ensminger of the Sming Dynasty wants to know: do you have a cast or staff league currently, or did you on Psych? And if so, who has won it?
I definitely would have won it. Unfortunately, my castmates are nearly invested in football as much as I am. Dule is a fair weather 49ers and fair weather Jets fan. He'll get excited if they're doing well. If they're not, he wouldn't be able to tell you who's playing quarterback.
So Dule is a front runner. So you're saying. Yeah. Okay. And now let's get into Fishbowl a little bit. Scott Fishbowl.
Yes.
I know I've been in the last three. I know you've been in those three. Were you in there prior to that, or?
I think I was in the last three as well. Yeah.
Okay. And I wanted to ask, how did you find out about Scott Fishbowl, and how did you end up in Scott Fishbowl?
If memory serves, I want to say Scott reached out to me himself, like I think over social media, and kind of said, "Hey, this is what it is. This is what I'm doing. Would love for you to participate." And as soon as I saw that it was for a great cause, I was like, "Oh, hell yeah!" You don't have to ask me twice. And I had kind of no idea what to expect because the league is kind of, as you know, it's kind of quirky. The setup is different.
Yeah.
Points are different. I'd never done like a tight end premium league before. It's so much fun, but at the same time, like it's the first draft you do like every year.
Yep.
And it prepares you for nothing really because there is no other league like it. So
and he switches up the scoring sometimes year over year.
So it's like it's not even really like practice for your other leagues. It is its own animal on its own island. A ton of fun, and then you kind of just forget everything you just did and try to like reprogram your brain for every other draft that you're going to do.
Okay, and I just saw a couple of things in the chat I just wanted to point out here. Like John Luke says that going back to your marriage comment, exactly the same as a marriage. My Dynasty League has experimented with role playing.
It's smart, man. You got to keep it loose.
Yeah, and Andrew in the chat says that because you mentioned playing on ESPN, do you like ESPN or MFL, My Fantasy League, which is where the Fishbowl is more?
MFL is the only Fishbowl is the only league I have on MFL. It's the only reason I know the platform. I know ESPN so well because I've been playing it so long. I actually think ESPN's got a pretty good platform. It's pretty user friendly, and for someone like me who like the less clicking, the less tabs, the less you have to do to make a pick, the better. With someone like me, I basically need to be slapped in the face with something that says draft player. And ESPN is pretty good about that. So I'll give them their props.
That definitely does make sense, especially if you're just redraft. There's a lot of people who like MFL like it because it's so customizable and you can do all these sort of different things for Dynasty, which is and for redraft, which is why Scott's using it to when you're having a 1,900 person tournament with strange scoring settings, it's definitely the way to go. And speaking of Scott, he chimed in, hey, James, thank you for all the kind words and pushing this mentality elsewhere. This is year 5 for you. And I think it's more than you thought. And Liz Loza introduced us, probably over social, but I can't remember. Time flies.
Props, yes. Liz Loza, my dear friend, fantasy football girl from Yahoo Sports. That makes sense. 5, man. Wow, I'm a KG Fishbowl veteran, man.
Yeah, I guess you are, and all that experience paid off last year, as you mentioned. I did look it up. James went 12-0 last year. Was one of the highest scorers, I think, in all of Fishbowl. I guess just got unlucky in the playoffs. I wasn't
totally flipping out. It was just crash and burn, but it was just one of those years. Anyone who's been playing fantasy for any amount of time, who has like those special years. Especially in a tournament as big as this one, when you look back at your team, like it's never a mystery as to why it happened. Like you either hit on some major dart throws, or you got somebody at a position of value that was just insane, and that's why you won. It's never like, oh look, I went chalk all the way down and I beat everybody. Like it's never that. And last year in the Fishbowl was no exception. I was the first pick overall. Everybody was, I think, still very much in a get your running backs early kind of frame of mind. I rolled the dice with Mahomes. And then Josh Allen was sitting there for me, I want to say in like the 5th round as my QB2. And then I threw a dart at Justin Herbert very, very late. And
I saw that.
not even having to use him, but kept him from being on any other team in my league. Justin Jefferson, a late round dart, ended up playing like a wide receiver 1. Took my boy Derrick Henry in the 2nd round. Homer pick, paid huge dividends. So it's always like, and that's why everybody knows, like, you have to hit on some wild cards, and you have to take risks, and you have to reach, for the guys that you think could explode, because that's how you beat 1,900 people.
Yeah, and I think I saw also you had Antonio Gibson on that roster last year. So if we're going to look at James's team very shortly, so and any rookies he's in on, you may want to hope you drafted them as well, or look at them going forward, because he hit on pretty much all the lower valued rookies last year. So
that's right. And I should tell you, like, I think I let you know before we got started, but my league mates in the David Bowie division have rallied so that I could officially end the David Bowie draft on your podcast.
Yes.
Because I do have the 12th pick, which means selecting Mr. Irrelevant is my responsibility.
Yes, I can't. I'm sure it'll be very exciting to see who the 22-12 is in the draft.
I'm on the clock, so thank you to my league for rallying.
Okay, so before I am gonna pull that up on screen too, but I know you're. I just wanted to ask you, the David Bowie division is where you are, and you are 112. Were those both choices of yours, or did they just end up that way?
100%. I was a little late to the party, knowing that this year the divisions were going to be based on bands. Last year, I was actually able to suggest muscle figures, which was the league that I was in. This year, I was like, oh, wow, bands. And then when I looked at what all the choices were, it was either going to be Bowie or The Cure, and for me, and sort of as a tribute, since we recently lost the unrivaled, Jesus of pop music. I wanted to represent in the Bowie division. And then because I was first last year, I thought it would be fun to be at the other turn this year. Kind of sort of randomly went with 12th.
So that wasn't even, I was going to ask if that was influenced by the whole 3rd round reversal thing. That didn't even factor in.
Maybe sort of subconsciously, like knowing, it comes back to you in the 3rd round. Helped sort of push that decision. But I also figured if I was at a turn, it would be half as many times as I would need to be aware that I was on the clock. I thought that would be helpful to my league, and to everyone who gets excited about these drafts and wants to keep them moving. If I was on one of the ends.
Okay, it makes sense. And now I will, like we did earlier, I'll bring up on the screen your team, and we can talk about a little bit about your team. And did you have any specific strategy going in before we get into any specific players?
Yeah, I would say that I was either going to go running back, quarterback, or 2 quarterbacks if I liked who was there. Those were sort of my 2 approaches going in, knowing as always that you might have to throw out everything you think because
true.
It's just one curveball after another. But as it played out, there were not 2 quarterbacks sitting there that I felt super stoked about taking back-to-back on the turn, which made it pretty easy. Who's the best running back on the board? It was Saquon. I was pretty delighted that he fell. I had a feeling that he might, just because he's coming off the injury. We haven't seen him in a minute. But I do think that if he performs anywhere close to what we know he can do with all the additional help they now have on that offense, a lot of people who got Saquon late in the 1st or even in the 2nd round are going to be pretty happy.
I was at the 111, and I ended up with actually Saquon and Eckler, who you also have here.
I was stoked about that too. And then Herbert was the best quarterback on the board at that point. They really flew off the shelves in our draft. By the way, I got to say, I'm playing with some real solid fantasy players in the David Bowie division. Everybody knows their stuff. There were no like real head scratchers. All of the reaches seemed like calculated reaches from people who knew exactly who they wanted. And it was good. Like I was just pick after pick after pick. I was like, this is going to be tough. There's no gimmies. There's no gimmies in this room. So kudos to my league for drafting really well. And towards the end, when people started drafting guys that I'd never heard of, that's when I also knew like, oh wow, these people who've done their homework,
right,
might actually be in trouble. But yeah, that was the approach coming out of the gate, and then third round reversal again. It was for me. It was either like take that second quarterback because they're flying off the shelves, or if there's a running back there that you just can't say no to, do that. I was going to fade wide receivers no matter what, which I think was probably a ton of people's strategy.
Right.
Fishbowl, so that wasn't really a consideration. And when Eckler was still there and I had Justin Herbert in my head, I'm just like, everything goes right. This guy could catch 75, 80 balls this year. And those are just really easy points that boost Justin's completion percentage. I like the idea of a stack, and it just felt real nice. So
yeah.
That was
I'm sorry. I was just gonna say it's nice to get that stack especially when you don't have to force it. And I think you got pretty nice luck there with Herbert coming to you at 201. I know he was drafted before my pick in a lot of different drafts before the 111. I tend to wait a little more on quarterback, and I see you did wait on your second quarterback. So was that a conscious decision, or is just you kept liking the other positions? If for people who can't see it, he drafted Darnold at the 901 in his QB2. Do you like Darnold, or you just had to pick somebody at some point?
It became a conscious decision once I let fifth, sixth, seventh round go. I just didn't love any of the QBs were there, and I certainly didn't love them that much more than Sam Darnold. To use one of those picks on a quarterback. So it basically just became like, okay, I know that my QB2 could be questionable. I'm gonna pump up at some of the other positions as much as I can, and then I'm gonna throw a few darts and hope that one of them works out. But no, I wasn't jumping up and down when I got Sam Darnold as my QB2. I told Liz, and she was like, I was like, I don't think this is great. She was like, no, sir, it's not. So I definitely, I feel like, there's certainly plenty of reasons to doubt young Sam, but he is in a new situation with a new system. I think it was really important that he get out of New York. It was never going to happen for him there for a myriad reasons. But if he can come in and embrace the fresh start, he's got arguably the best player in football lined up behind him and a couple of nice weapons to throw to. So, if there is a candidate for a bounce back season out there, it's got to be Sam Darnold, because he's coming from like garbage to whatever he does. So, I have some hopes. A couple rounds later, I took a swing at Taysom Hill, because if he does win that job, and I know that the odds are probably with Jameis, but if he were to make any sort of real number of starts, we know what he can do with his legs. And, that's a commodity, and you want it. You want it in the Fishbowl. So that's got some upside. And then Tyrod, I think he's probably going to start the whole year, frankly, in Houston. And, unless they throw, Mills a couple starts at the very end of the season just to see what they have. If they have any sort of designs on trying to compete and not be the laughingstock of football this year, and Tyrod can stay healthy, I think he's probably going to do the majority of quarterbacking for that team. So it felt like a nice piece to sort of have on the bench.
I think you're probably right. Even if Watson gets on the field this season, I doubt it's for Houston. So it'll probably beat Tyrod most of the way. And I kind of agree with you on Darnold. I mean, you shouldn't have to draft him much earlier than you did, but I definitely think there is some upside there with the, Joe Brady as the offensive coordinator. They didn't Teddy didn't throw a lot of touchdowns, but he did make Teddy look semi-competent last year. So, and Darnold has more talent than Teddy Bridgewater. So, especially if you're going to wait till the 9th round, which I didn't do. I think I drafted Ben in the 7th or 8th, Big Ben. So, but yeah, I like Darnold. Darnold's probably more of an upside play than even Ben is, which is good in a 1,900 person tournament as well. And someone had commented in the chat, I believe it was Andrew, about going with the homer pick as your wide receiver 1 and Julio. Does your fandom influence that pick, or what do you see for Julio as a Titans fan?
Yes, it was a homer pick. It was the only unmitigated, can't deny it homer pick I made in this draft. But the truth is, look, I waited till the 5th round. Those stud wide receiver 1s were all gone. So I'm basically looking at a wide receiver 2 that I hope has wide receiver 1 upside, or the guy that all of us Titans fans got super juiced is playing for the Titans now. I don't anticipate him having vintage Julio Jones type season, especially with AJ on the other side. But I'm hoping that he can stay on the field, be really, really steady. And if he does sort of one level down Julio stuff and OBJ does old school OBJ stuff, then it'll actually be OBJ as my wide receiver 1 and Julio as my wide receiver 2. Again, it's asking for a lot, and that's what makes fantasy football so much fun.
Especially Scott Fishbowl, you kind of have to take from here to get stuff in other places, and with the 11 starting spots, it's almost impossible to have every spot be really good. So, and just I did want to mention too, for people who are just listening, if you wanted the rookie whisperer, James Roday Rodriguez, the rookies he picked were Devontae Smith in the 8th, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Ramondre Stevenson late, and Josh Palmer late, it looks like. So if he has as good an injury as rookie luck as last year, you might want to get those guys on your teams. I'm sorry, were you going to say anything?
I think Devonta is going to become, the alpha on that receiving core pretty quickly.
I agree.
So I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling pretty good about that. Of course, it requires Jalen Hurts to throw with some degree of accuracy, which would be great. But we also know that Devonta can catch the ball and turn it into a big play. From the backfield, I'm sure they'll set up stuff to kind of try and get him in space and get him comfortable. So I think Devonta is a pretty safe, high floor rookie to go with that you can get, after Jamar Chase and potentially get just as much production, if not more, because Jamar is going to have to share with a couple other pretty good wide receivers in Cincinnati.
That's the point I was going to make. Yeah, I could see him in year 1 anyway, outproducing Chase because of the mouths to feed in Cincinnati. And I guess, like we said, you're on the clock for the 22-12. So, and by the way, Scott mentioned the top 15 teams last year averaged just over 4 rookies, which I think you're at 4 now. So maybe you want to pick a rookie here, since that seems to be the recipe to be a top 15 team. But I don't know if you want to give some options here, and maybe we can crowdsource it. There's still a decent amount of people in the chat, it looks like.
I think that's a great idea. I think I'll present an A and a B and let the most number of votes win, because I am thinking about 2 players and 1 is a rookie. So you framed this perfectly. But before I officially end this draft, I want to give a shout out to the rest of my league mates for being a great group of people. We had a lot of fun. Our draft kind of moved at a sort of it wasn't super fast, and for me, I think that kind of made it more fun because once these drafts are over, they're over, and then it's kind of like, well, we have some dead spot, like a dead period before we're drafting again. So I don't mind the slow draft really, and it was fun to get to know them a little bit, and they were all pretty active in the chat. And everyone was really cool. So I'm going to shout them out quickly by name because this is my league, man. These are my peeps. In order that we drafted, it was Jarek Backus, Tim Aylesworth, Mike Sheen, John Luke Garofalo, Kelly Hall, Eric Moody, Maria Vicenzi, who I think might be sweet on Jean-Luc, Aaron Spires, Justin Mason, Brian McLeish, Alex Newman, and then me. That's David Bowie. We're coming at you hard.
That's great.
One of us will be a factor by the end of this tournament. And now, without further ado, with the final pick in the 2021 Scott Fishbowl 11 David Bowie division, Mr. Irrelevant will either be San Diego Charger rookie running back Larry Roundtree
or
Los Angeles Rams veteran footman Matt Gay.
Interesting. I did mean to note as well that you did not put they had kickers this year. I noticed there was no kicker on your team. I actually drafted a couple.
I haven't done it yet, and whoever's still sticking around at this point after all this yapping that we've done.
I know. We need some comments in the chat. I don't see anybody saying anything. Roundtree is a little interesting. I've heard rumors that Justin Jackson could be cut, and Eckler, he's going to do his thing, but there's definitely going to be a lot of running attempts there, rushing attempts for somebody else. So we have two. Now we got two in the chat say kicker. There's a Roundtree. Three say kicker. They're not even giving him his name though. It's just kicker. So right now it's 3-1 kicker. All three of them say kicker versus 1 for Roundtree. Another one kicker. So it's looking like it's Matt Gay's the runaway winner here. Of the 5 people who responded, it's 4-1 so far. Unless we get some more votes soon, I think you're going Matt Gay.
Matt Gay, and I'm not bummed. I'm not bummed about that. They've added this new wrinkle this year. You don't want to be the guy who's stuck without a chair when the music stops. I think everybody else in the league has a kicker. So.
And you're in good company, apparently. Scott says Matt Gay. Barry took him 22-12 as well.
Well, if he's good enough for Matt Barry, he's good enough for me. Let me get in here on my phone and make this official live on your podcast.
I appreciate that, James. It's a momentous occasion here, picking the 22-12.
It's been a great run. The Bowies had a great draft. And with the last pick, I have officially selected Los Angeles Rams kicker, Matt Gay.
There we go. Done right here on the podcast. And I know we were trying to keep this to an hour. We've already gone over. Do you have time to stick around a little longer to talk about some of these?
I know you want to grill me on some poorly constructed Dynasty that I made in my first ever Dynasty League. So why don't you beat me up for a few more minutes on that?
Okay. So James is gracious enough to share his league with me. I will say there are definitely a lot of heavy hitters in this league. I saw Rich Rebar is in there. I think it looked like maybe Matt Harmon was in there. There's somebody named Harmon. JJ Zachariason. Also, fellow Scott Fishbowl participant Tom Everett Scott. Not quite the hard hitter fantasy analyst wise, but he knows his stuff too. And
combo of experts and some entertainer types that one expert and one entertainment type came together and created. So
okay. So he made some trades. All these were. I don't think you've made any since like around the draft time, right? I only saw the 3 around draft time. And this one was made on April 7th, pre-draft. And this was the one I told James was a little rough. It's a 12-team Superflex PPR league. I don't believe there's any tight end premiums on it, but that doesn't factor into this trade anyway. And he traded away Dak, Lamb, CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, and some Boston Scott in the 404 for the 102, Tyler Boyd and Rashad Penny. So when you said you were willing to do this, you said that you can do these trades and call me out for being a lunatic. So lunatic is strong, but what were you thinking here? Or you
What
just had the rookie fever? Or
Well, what I was thinking was my first dynasty season ever was lost because my quarterbacks were Joe Burrow and Dak Prescott, and I did not want to build a team banking on two guys coming back from gruesome leg injuries. So I made the sort of blanket choice that I was going to trade one of them. And after doing a little bit of tire kicking, it became clear that Dak was going to return way more value, understandably with his track record. But honestly, if I was to say I was more concerned about one over the other coming back from their respective injuries, I would say I'm less concerned about Burrow, because we've seen plenty of guys come back from from that, and Dak is something different. So I was cool to trade Dak. That wasn't a tough decision. And
I
then
don't hate the decision for you to trade Dak. I just feel like you could have gotten a little more back than you got.
well, I dealt with my friend Garrett Lerner, who brought me into the league. Is a wonderful television writer and show creator who, by the way, I'll give him a plug, has a new show coming this season to NBC called Ordinary Joe. Ordinary Joe
Okay.
is Garrett's. But yeah, he invited me into this league, and I think then took a reasonable degree of pleasure in walking me, behind the woodshed and sticking it to me, because he's been playing Dynasty for longer than I have. So it makes sense in retrospect that he would have gotten the better end of that deal. But what I knew about Dynasty was go young, young, young. You want young guys. You want to build for the future. I didn't look at my roster and think, this is a team that has a chance of winning the league this year. So I wasn't super concerned about that. But Garrett was sitting on pick 102 and 104 overall, which felt kind of sexy. And that was ultimately what hooked me, is like, oh wow, I get to make, two of the first four picks in my first ever rookie draft. That I was a sucker for that. And so I kind of knew that, the first pick would be Trevor, like obviously, and that I could kind of get a running back and a wide receiver that maybe I could have on my team for the next 5, 6, 7 years. So I traded Dak. I picked Najee at 2 and Jamar at 4.
Yes, which I do really like those picks.
And then I also brought in Tyler Boyd to further strengthen my Cincinnati Bengals dynasty stack. Fully recognizing that on paper, it probably looks better for Garrett, who gets Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, who might be the next superstar wide receiver in the National Football League. And then to make up for the fact that I didn't take any of the quarterbacks, I dealt my first rounder, which was the 9th pick overall, and next year's second rounder, I believe, for Jalen Hurts, which, at that slot in the draft, I felt like was a decent dice to roll. I'm not really stressing out over a second round pick in a draft that hasn't happened yet. So,
and you might not know, but a lot of the people who look ahead to drafts and things like that, Debbie guys, they are saying that next year's draft is not very deep. So seconds might be something you want to trade away in that draft. So
there, I did something decent. Jalen hits. Sweet. I've got 2 young quarterbacks with, hopefully a bright future.
Yeah, and that one I really like. I think Jalen's going to score a lot this year. It's just a matter of whether he can hold on to the job beyond this year. So a lot of it's going to probably depend on how good their record is. As an Eagles fan, I'm hoping it's good. I'm a little skeptical. Just generally pessimistic overall. But I think regardless of how they do, he's going to probably put up a ton of points this year, and he's just got to figure out a way to get some wins to hold on to his job, I think, because they do have 3 first-round picks next year, so they could look for a quarterback if he doesn't win enough for their liking, I think.
Well, I'll be pulling for him, which means I'll be pulling for the Eagles, Rock.
Good. And I like I said, I like the value you got there. 109, one later first and a second, I think is really good value for a young starting quarterback. And then the other trade was just a kind of a baby, whatever trade, which I think you traded a third next year, for Anthony McFarland and a fourth next year. So basically, you got him for almost free. And I get you mentioned you drafted Najee Harris. Do you like doing the handcuff thing? Is that why you made that trade, or?
Yeah, I guess I figured even though like if I were to somehow get lucky and the planets aligned and I'm somehow competing this season, and then Najee were to go down for a game or two or three, I felt like it probably made sense. I have Benny Snell too, so I think between the two of them, I will have whoever's starting in that Pittsburgh backfield, which we know is a great gig because but they'll be behind one of the worst offensive lines.
True.
So awesome. I'm all set. I'm all set with whoever's toting the rock back there.
Yeah, so not too. It looks like, and these were all made like in sequential order. Like I said, the first one was made prior to the draft, and when you got Boyd, actually Chase wasn't even there, so it looked that looked a little better in terms of getting Boyd back. And then I believe it looks like you may have made the Hurts trade during the draft or right around draft time, and then the McFarland one right after. So you're going the right direction in terms of the learning curve. If you feel free to hit me up next time if Garrett comes at you for a trade, and I'll help you out. Okay.
I will indeed, Rocky. But I'm a sucker for trades, man. I love it. That's why.
So do I. I'm in a league, and I host another podcast that's called Trade Addicts Podcast. So,
it's fun. And I've never had like picks to deal with before. It was a brand new fun experience for me. I was like a kid. I was like a little boy.
Kid in the candy shop. Okay, and that's pretty much going to finish it up here. We ran long. I appreciate you staying on this long. We're at I think about 120 now. I was trying to keep it to an hour for you, but I appreciate you staying on. I appreciate you coming on. I just some guy that kind of randomly reached out to you a little while back. We've been going back and forth. We finally got this date, and it's been a great conversation. I loved talking to you about Psych, about a million little things, and giving you a little dig about your Dynasty team. So anything
with my schedule, Rocky, I appreciate it. And
no problem. And just anything you want to say or plug or anything before we sign off here?
Yeah, I'll once again sort of echo what you said about Scott Fish and the idea that we as a community of people who are so passionate about playing fantasy football can come together every year, take it upon ourselves to do some good as well. So thank you again to Scott for sort of perpetuating that idea, and for anybody who's watching or who's planning on doing any high stakes fantasy this year with the NFFC or any of those high stakes places. I hope you're listening too. We play a game, and it's for money or it's not for money or for whatever it is, but what's really behind it is a love. It's a love for football that we all share. So if we can use just a little bit of that love, to put towards some really worthy causes, like what a great thing for a community that I think sometimes is stigmatized just as a bunch of like sports geeks. Like, hey, we're actually thoughtful, and we can do some real good together as fantasy football lovers.
Yeah, that's a great sentiment. I'm glad you finished up with that, and what you did again with the Miz last year, and I think you said you might do that again. It was great as well. So definitely good stuff. I'll just finish up here then with some of our business, and just remind everybody you can follow the pod at Dynasty Junkies. I'm at Dynasty FF Addict. My co-host who could not make it today is at Andrew Hall FF. Please make sure you're also following the DAP Network, Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network, at DAP_network. Also, you can subscribe on YouTube so you can see when great guests like James come on here. You can see him talking to me and hopefully Andrew in the future. And also, if you get a chance, if you like what you've heard, just subscribe to the podcast. Give us a rating and review, preferably a 5-star rating, and that helps us out a lot. Helps people find us. Let us know what you think. So that's going to do it for this week. Again, I can't say how much I appreciate James you coming on, and that'll be it. Junkies out.
Anything less than a 5-star rating is my fault, not yours, Rod.
Okay, Junkies out.
Yeah, man. Later.